Hello and welcome to this Optimec AJ200 training video. This video is specifically on the disassembly and cleaning of the parts. So once again, before we start, always very important to have gloves on, especially when you're disassembling. Once you're disassembling, that's right after you print, there's going to be ink all over the parts. Right now there's nothing. This is just for educational purposes, but if you're printing some kind of solvent, you don't want that on your hands, so always wear gloves. And usually you want this done in a fume hood. So I'm just going to be taking this apart in the same order that I put it together. So once again, we have the atomization head, the adapter, the tube, and finally the deposition head. So when you're taking this out of the printer, what's going to happen is you're going to have these three separate parts, but it's the most convenient to always, while it's still in the printer, just take the tube out first. So unscrew this part of the atomization head adapter so that this is just in the system. And like I said, it's not great to have your ink lying flat. If there is ink in the vial, always keep it vertical, so you don't want that ink to be flowing in through the parts. So in the system, when you're taking it out, it's going to be vertical. So once you're taking it out, first thing you want to do is just unscrew the vial and immediately just put the vial in your holder or wherever you're storing it. And then you're able to place it flat on some kind of clean surface. So I just have paper towels here. There's going to be ink all over the mist tube adapter, so always have some kind of covering. And then we're just going to take it apart in the same order we put it together. So take this mist head adapter, take that off, and now we have all these distinct parts. I'm going to take the tube out of the deposition head as well. So now we have all the parts that we'll be taking apart and having to clean. The most critical parts are specifically the tip that's in the deposition head right now, the vial, and the tube. If I'm going to start with the atomization head, same thing, you take your 332 key, unscrew this part, that's over there, so we can take this apart. And like I said, there's going to be ink kind of everywhere here, so you want to be careful. Just take these screws out. The O-ring that's over here, that's going to need a good clean. Specifically the part that screws into the vial, you can see in this one. It's still very dirty. So this is the part that you're going to want to clean quite vigorously, as well as the actual mist tube adapter, because the ink goes through there. You can even see some residues on where it enters the vial. So you're going to want to wash that out quite a bit. This part, not as much, just the part where the O-ring was, just in there. There's usually some ink on there. So that's disassembly of the atomization head. Let's continue to the mist tube adapter. So this part here with the thread and the ferrule, not usually too dirty, but give it a rinse anyway. This O-ring that's found in here as well could use a wash. What we do is we just run solvent through this part as well, because there's some buildup in there. So that's the mist head adapter. Finally, the deposition head. Just unscrew with your fingers. Take the tip off. And we have a separate procedure for cleaning this. I'll be coming up shortly. And how we actually disassemble this part. So if you go back and you take your tube, take the little plastic ferrule off and this thread. So this plastic blue fitting with the thread on the end, what you can do is you can screw that back into the deposition head. Is you can push, if you lay this flat against the table and you push, it'll actually push out this part pretty easily. And that part just comes right off, and then you can unscrew the thread again, put it back, and then this will just fall out as well. So these parts also get kind of fouled up, so you want to run solvent through there as well as this part here. You can see the light there, but you want to be careful not to clog it. Okay, so put aside the parts that you don't have to clean, that don't have any ink. So this part here, the thread that fits the tube, this part that just secures the outside of the tube in the atomization head assembly, the screws, obviously, screws back. Set aside the plastic fittings here as well. Everything else you should probably rinse in varying degrees of rigor, obviously. So this part, you should probably clean that very well, as well as the tube itself and the mist head adapter. One thing that's very easy to forget is actually this part here. So this is the kind of screw plug. And there's actually going to be a lot of ink that comes out of here, so you should be careful. One last part here. That just comes right out. And once again, you're definitely going to get some ink on your fingers here taking this out, so should definitely wear gloves. And this part is a part that should be rinsed out quite well, actually. These are the disassembled parts, and these are what you would rinse. So that's coming up right here soon. Okay, now that you have all of your parts disassembled, the first thing to note is for cleaning, you always want to use a like solvent. So a solvent that is, for example, if your ink is organic, it's best to use an organic solvent. It just dissolves easier, makes it easier to clean. If it's water-based, you can just use water. For example, another example is that you can use a xylene-based solvent to clean a xylene-based ink. First of all, a procedure that we always do regardless of what happens is we always use a vial to clean the tip. So what we do is I'm just going to use water here because I'm not in a fume hood. You would fill up this vial with whatever solvent that you're using to clean, and then you would deposit your tip or your nozzle into it. About halfway is fine for the length of our nozzle. So you can see that in there, it's completely covered, which is good. And what you would do with this is you would seal it, obviously, and we would always sonicate these. A lot of clogs can happen in these depending on the nozzle diameter size. Our smallest one is about 100 microns, so very small clogs can easily happen, so you really want to do a deep clean on this. The average time that we use is about 20 minutes of sonication time. It could be more or less depending on the kind of ink that you're printing with. Some inks clean very easily, some don't. So once that's sonicated, you can unscrew it, take it back out again. It's always best to use square tip tweezers for this application here. So that's out, and wherever you're depositing your waste, it's always good to have a beaker or somewhere where you can put that waste so you can dispose of that properly later. What we do next is we're always trying to run solvent through it. So once again, I'm just going to use water. So what we like to do is you take your spray bottle, and there's a opening right there in the tip, and that just goes out to the other end that way. So when you're putting fluid through it, you want to put the tip right on the hole there. You can run solvent pretty easily through it without having it blocked. So that should just be solvent through there. What you can do next is, usually for this we use a duster. You can also use N2 gas, just dry it off a little bit. And also what we like to do is just put that duster on the tip of the nozzle and just blow air through it, just to make sure all the solvent comes out. Give it another dry here. And that should be clean. This is a 300 micron nozzle, so you can see the opening be quite clear here. Usually you have to inspect this again under a microscope just to make sure there's no ink accumulation in the middle of the tip. So if that were to happen, when you're printing, you would see kind of irregular shapes. You wouldn't see a nice circular deposition. You would see kind of a mismatch. So you just have to make sure that this is completely clear. If it's not clear, just make sure that you're either sonicating for a longer time or use a more appropriate solvent. So that's the cleaning of the tip. Now I'm going to demonstrate how to clean the rest of the parts. So these are all the parts that we've disassembled previously. What you do is you would just take your spray bottle, whatever solvent, just take each part in turn, just rinse it. And this particular part, that's just where the O-ring sits in there. That's really the only part that needs to be rinsed. It's the part to a deposition head. So, good to run solvent through that hole. Just rinse the entirety of the part. Another part of the deposition head. And again, this is a good idea to do anyway, even if you did sonicate it, because those parts will have been sitting in solvent that you've sonicated your ink with, so that ink is going to be in that solvent anyway, so it's a good reason to just rinse it anyway after you're done sonicating. So you should probably do this procedure every time that you want to either switch inks or you're putting your parts away for a long time and you don't want that ink to dry in your parts and cause clogs later on. So I wanted to point out this part here. So there is actually, I don't know if the camera can pick this up, but there is a break in this O-ring. And usually these are quite obvious. A reason this could happen actually is you're running an incompatible O-ring material with an incompatible ink. So O-rings can actually swell and break depending on the solvent they come into contact with. For example, EPDM O-rings, which these aren't compatible with xylenes. So let's say you're sonicating for 30 minutes, your O-rings in xylene, or your EPDM O-rings in xylene, those will definitely swell. Okay, next parts, the pickup tube. So in particular, this tube does get fouled quite easily. Usually it's best to run solvent through here until you can't see any ink come out anymore. And it's also sometimes a good idea to just run a pipe cleaner through it as well, because it can get accumulated in there. A few more parts here. Quickly rinse. These are from the mist tube adapter. This beige part also is a very difficult to clean part. You can see even on the camera here, there's quite a bit of fouling. So this wasn't cleaned completely. So it's also a good idea to maybe at some point take a pipe cleaner to it with your appropriate solvent and just scrub to make sure there's no residue in there. Okay, the final part we have here is the actual mist tube adapter. It's a good idea to also run solvent through here. And then we just leave these to dry. So if you need to use these very quickly after you've washed them, what you can do is you can just dry them with nitrogen gas, for example. If you need to use them within, say, 30 minutes or so, you can actually rinse these all with IPA, and IPA will dry very, very quickly. It also serves the dual purpose of cleaning it a little bit better. So there you go, that's the cleaning of all these parts. Before I continue, I should address, for the previous parts, the ones that we just cleaned and dried here, if you want to do a really deep clean on it, what you can do is also just put all these, let's say, in a jar or some kind of bath, and in your solvent you would make sure those parts are covered and you could sonicate them for a long time. For example, you're cleaning silver and acetone, you can drop all these parts in acetone and sonicate them for 20-30 minutes. But like I said, it's probably a good idea to always rinse them anyway after that, because they'll be sitting in that sonicated solvent with all the residues of the previous ink. It's always a good idea to rinse them anyway. The final part is the vial. So right now this doesn't have any ink in it, but I'm going to demonstrate how to clean it anyway. Just need to remember that the bottom of this vial is very fragile, so avoid spraying ink with force directly onto the bottom of the vial. Maybe just do the sides. You can see there's now water in there. A good idea is to use just a swab to very lightly just brush away the sides of the vial, but just keep washing it away until the side walls are clear. There's always accumulation kind of at this side, right in this bend in the vial, as well as on the actual thread itself. When it comes to cleaning the very bottom, once again, it's very fragile, so just try to apply as little force as possible when you're swabbing the bottom. And just keep repeating that, maybe with some fresh solvent, fresh swabs, until it's all clean. If there is ink in here to start, it's good to always reuse that ink, otherwise you can just dump it. Let's say it's some kind of polymer, cheap polymer based ink, you can always just dump that directly. If something more expensive like a metallic ink, it's good to use a pipette to get all that ink out if you do want to keep it in the vial. If you have another vial, it's always good to just use a fresh vial if you're going to change inks a lot. So that's clean, and we could just leave that to dry as well. And again, you can also use IPA for this one. So there you have it. That's the cleaning of all the parts. All these parts are now clean. So to recap, sonication of the tip plus the procedure I showed with the duster and the solvent through it. We should do this every single time. The rest of the parts, which you can sonicate as well as just rinse with solvent in your jar. And then finally, your vial cleaning. And that's all the cleaning. So this is a sequence of events in which you would take the parts for the ultrasonic atomizer out of the printer for cleaning. So first, make sure that your ultrasonic transducer is already off before you switch the bath off. So now what you would do is just first get the mist tube line off. So you can see it's quite dirty. And then remove the atomization head with the vial. So of course you don't want to be tipping this over at any point. You always want to keep this straight. So remove the vial. As you can see, it's quite dirty. And then place the vial in one of the holders that I mentioned. Now that that's off, what you can do is release the process camera so that you can take the deposition head out. Get the collar off. Just place this on a tray. And then you just follow the standard procedure shown in the other videos.